Hey everybody, welcome back to the second part of my PTR analysis, covering over the Chaos Armors. Now, this could have been a very long video, because the total combinations of things that you can do are like truly wild. One of the issues that we ran into, though, was in understanding just how difficult it is to fit more unique items onto a build. Because when you're looking at a build with a lot of uniques already on it, it gets kind of difficult to really shuffle them around or to find interesting ways to add them. It's going to be difficult to find items that are stronger than Air of Perdition, as well as Shroud of False Death. Of these unique items, playing build Tetris, which one of them are truly impactful? And I could go down the list of all of these items, right? Each one of them has its own little kind of interesting use case. And I think the general wisdom that I would share with you is that prior to getting your mythics, you know, the things that the majority of players don't actually end up getting in a season, all of these unique items are significantly more interesting to play around with because you just have more slots to be able to put them into. There aren't as many interesting options for unique items once you're looking at an endgame build. Basically, what you're asking is, can I fit this onto my boots? Because Bloodless Scream is going to be a weapon that you could use on darkness builds that say as long as an enemy is frozen or it is a boss, you will get a 200% increase to damage. So that's a 3 times damage multiplier. These will be increased by 20%, so that bumps all the way up to a whopping 240% or 3.4 times multiplier. And the rest of the stats on it are actually also kind of interesting, right? Plus to darkness skills, intelligence, lucky a chance to be able to restore a resource, and the additive non-physical damage, because this is actually the really important part. Items are going to include their implicit stats. If I wear Bloodless Scream boots, it's not going to give me evade charges. It's going to give me additive damage. And it's when you start looking at the implicit stats on gear that you start to ask some really interesting questions, like, how does that implicit work if it's not in its original item slot? Banished Lord's Talisman, as an amulet, if you were to wear it in your boot slot or your pants or wherever you were to put it, will keep the implicit all resistance, meaning that taking any ring or amulet and slotting it into another gear piece is going to make hitting res very easy. The issue being, though, that the majority of the time for our boots, we're already using that to be able to hit our armor caps. Luckily, you can use some incense to be able to hit your armor cap without having this stat on your boots, or you could even put total armor as a temper onto your amulet to be able to help shore this up as well. There's always the tried and true spiked armor for additional armor, but different items are vastly different value when you consider the implicit stats on them. If we use Crown of Lucian as an example, Crown of Lucian is just a helmet, so it doesn't actually have any implicit stats on it. The other stats on it are pretty okay. It has a fairly decently large damage multiplier, but as a boot slot, this doesn't really bring anything more interesting to the table. Things like Flicker Step being a boot as a start, being swapped up to your gloves or onto your pants, means that you can gain this attack reduce your evade's cooldown on other gear slots, as well as evading gaining you movement speed. And this is before we even consider things like the actual unique aspect, reducing the cooldown on ultimates. So Flicker Step is probably going to find its way into a lot of very interesting builds, but none of this, and I can't stress this enough, none of this compares to what is arguably the most innocuous item on this list of Necromancer specific items. You know what? I'm going to do the bait. Let me know down in the comments what you think your guess is. I'm going to give you the Wheel of Fortune. I'm going to give you the Jeopardy 5-second count here to make your guess. And if you get it right, I'm going to, I don't know, I'll double like your comment or something, but I'll let you know if you were right. And there we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's Lidless Wall. That's right. That shield you've probably never equipped. Lidless Wall is like a weird double-edged sword where we kind of don't care about any of the stats on it at all. We only really care about the aspect, and we care about the implicit stats on it. Because the implicit stats on Lidless Wall, being an offhand shield, are very interesting. One, it gives you block chance. So technically speaking, you could equip this in another shield. You could go double shield Necro. I would never recommend doing that, but if you're on hardcore, maybe that's something that you want to explore. It also grants you blocked damage reduction. So if you had 2 of these bad boys on, you'd have 40% chance to block just as a basis. And then maybe 90% damage reduction. I assume it continues to stack like regular damage reduction, where it's 2 different instances of 45%. but there's a chance that they're additive with one another. That would be bananas. It's the next stat that really asks some incredibly interesting questions. What does it mean if my boots say plus 80% main hand weapon damage? How does that work? I think it's an 80% damage multiplier for free. The way that your offhands typically work is that a focus actually has its own damage value, and a shield merely modifies the base damage of your main hand. So with this dagger on, I have 298 damage per second, and if I were to put on a focus, which actually has the same amount of damage per second, I have doubled my damage per second in total. And while attack power is not important for anything else, right now it's properly communicating something, you'll see that with just my dagger on, I have basically 6,200, and then when I put this on, it gets doubled for the attack power because they have the exact same value, the exact same attack speed. But if I were to change this over to a shield instead, you notice that my attack power is slightly less. And the math of that is very simple. You either get 2 or you get 1.8. So 2 divided by 1.8 is a 11% increase in damage, which means that you do 11% more using a focus rather than a shield. But this is just how the logic of it all works out, because Lidless Wall has a stat on it which says 80% increased main hand weapon damage. It's not actually modifying the weapon. It's not like coded to do this thing, right? It's just a stat that exists in the game that is only on shields in general. But if we could imagine that this flicker step is actually a lidless wall with the implicit of 80% increased weapon main hand damage, there's nothing stopping me from using a massive two-handed weapon and then getting another 80% damage multiplier on top of that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Lidless Wall's unique aspect is actually significantly stronger than you may have imagined just looking at it on paper. The long and short of it is that for each Bonestorm that you have up, you're going to deal 20% increased critical strike damage. And this is a separate multiplier. It doesn't change your additive stat, although it does in your character sheet, but it is a full multiplier. If you crit, you do 20% more damage. If you sacrificed all 3 of your minions and you have one active on you, you can actually summon a total of 5 Bonestorms. 5 times 20 is 100% damage, which is really, really strong. This basically says a 2 times damage multiplier if you have all 5 up. Or at least that's what you would think it works. Instead, each Bonestorm grants you its own 20% damage multiplier. And it turns out 1.2 to the 5th power is a lot stronger than just 2x. 5 separate 20% damage multipliers to your build, you've actually increased your damage by nearly 150%, or a 2.48 times multi. So this, in comparison to just the regular 2 times multi, is actually a full quarter more damage. It's 24% more damage than what you would think just looking at it on paper. So if Lidless Wall says gain a total of 148% increased damage and 80% increased damage, there are few options available in this game that come anywhere near that much multiplication because of this implicit existence. Now, obviously, that means that you would have to be using Bonestorm, the ultimate skill. And this isn't necessarily something that you can run on every single build in the game, right? Not every single build is able to run Lidless Wall and run Bonestorm. But the previous economy of how powerful this item was truly locked to the weapon slot that it was in. You were losing damage by using a shield as opposed to an offhand or a two-handed weapon, which is even stronger. You had a bunch of dumb stats on it that weren't particularly useful for your build if you weren't a Bonestorm related build. And while the multiplier was good, builds like minions didn't really want to be sacrificing every single minion to be able to get the benefit of this. But even something like Hand of Nas minions is now sacrificing 2 of them. That means you could have 4 Bonestorms up, which is 1.2 to the 4th. And if we were to look at just that damage right there, 1.2 to the 4th, that's already stronger than 100% increase in damage. That's ignoring the 80% implicit that you'll get as well. So unless this is changed, unless the developers make it so that this stat doesn't work in the way that it should, based on the fact that it's here, I think a lot of the Necromancer meta is going to be adding Lidless Wall on as boots, with the slight upside of typically we're using our boots to be able to solve our armor, like I said previously, but Lidless Wall grants you total armor. And while it's not enough to bridge the gap entirely, adding on a single temper of total armor up here as well will probably get the job done. So what do you think? Is Lidless Wall going to be as defining of the meta as I am imagining it currently will be? There are so many builds that just kind of use Soul Rift because there wasn't really a better option. But if I could have that much damage multiplication, I would gladly sacrifice a little bit of mobility on my boots to be able to add on that much damage. So I'm really excited to see what other people come up with. But I think that this one currently takes the cake for the least obvious and the most impactful, just because it's just so very unintuitive. But I think this thing is going to rock. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, it would help me out a ton. I think we already gained like 2,000 new subscribers in the past month or two, and we're trying to hit 100K. So if you can help me with that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.